Before we begin, if you're listening to this alone at night, you're exactly where you should be. Subscribe and turn on notifications for more true horror stories, disturbing encounters, and unexplained events uploaded every day. Now lock your doors, turn off the lights, and let's get into tonight's stories. Most people think pest control is about bugs, roaches, ants, termites, maybe the occasional mouse. But every technician eventually gets a call that has nothing to do with pests. The customer hears scratching inside the walls, something moving beneath the floor, something crawling through the attic. You show up expecting to find raccoons or rats. Most of the time, that's exactly what it is. The call I'm about to tell you about started with scratching under a house. It ended with me refusing to enter another crawlspace alone. My name is Brandon. I worked for a pest control company outside Charlotte. Most of my week was spent driving from one neighborhood to another inspecting homes for termites, rodents, and moisture damage. It wasn't glamorous work. A lot of it involved squeezing beneath houses barely high enough to crawl through. Darkness didn't bother me anymore. Neither did spiders. Or snakes. After enough crawl spaces, you stop thinking about what might be down there, until one homeowner tells you something that doesn't make sense. The call came just after lunch. The note simply read, "Customer hears scratching beneath bedroom every night. Previous inspection found nothing." That wasn't unusual. Animals often moved before technicians arrived. I loaded my inspection camera, flashlight, respirator, and coveralls into the truck before heading across town. The house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac. Older neighborhood. Large oak trees. Wooden fencing. Everything looked perfectly normal. The homeowner, an older man named Richard, greeted me on the porch. Before I even unloaded my equipment, he asked, "You work alone?" "Usually." He looked disappointed. "I was hoping they'd send two of you." I laughed. "It's probably just a raccoon." He didn't smile. "It isn't." Inside the house, he led me into the master bedroom. The scratching always came from the same spot beneath the floor. "Every night?" I asked. "Every night." "What time?" He looked toward the window. "Always after midnight." "You ever hear it during the day?" He slowly shook his head. "No." I checked the crawlspace entrance beside the garage. The wooden hatch opened without much effort. A cool, damp smell drifted out. Pretty typical. I switched on my headlamp and crawled inside. The space was tight. Bare dirt. Concrete block foundation. Rows of wooden support beams stretching into darkness. I moved slowly, checking for droppings, damaged insulation, and animal trails. Everything looked ordinary, until I reached the area beneath the bedroom. The dirt looked disturbed. Not by animals. By knees. Wide, smooth impressions formed a path through the soil. They didn't look fresh, but they didn't look old either. Something had been crawling there repeatedly. I followed the trail. It disappeared beneath a section of plastic vapor barrier. I lifted the edge. Nothing underneath. Just more dirt. I almost moved on when my flashlight caught something half buried in the soil. A flashlight battery. Still clean. Still shiny. Someone hadn't dropped it years ago. I put it in my pocket. As I started backing away, I heard a single scrape. Not ahead of me. Behind me. Like someone dragging a knee across dirt. I spun around. Nothing. Only my own trail leading back toward the crawlspace entrance. I finished the inspection and climbed outside. Richard waited exactly where I'd left him. "Find anything?" "No animals." He sighed. "I knew you wouldn't." I showed him the battery. "Does this belong to you?" His face immediately tightened. "No." That afternoon I filed the inspection as inconclusive. No rodent activity. No termite damage. No wildlife. Just disturbed soil. 2 days later, dispatch called again. Same address. Richard insisted the scratching had become louder. This time, he said he heard knocking beneath the bedroom floor. 3 slow knocks. Then silence. I returned just before sunset. Richard met me in the driveway. "I didn't tell dispatch everything." "What do you mean?" "I've gone under there myself." I stopped walking. "When?" 3 nights ago." "What happened?" "I heard someone breathing." I assumed fear had gotten the better of him. Dark crawl spaces can play tricks on anyone. Still, I decided to inspect the area again. This time I left small strips of fluorescent survey tape tied to the floor joists every few feet. If I somehow became disoriented, they'd guide me back. Everything looked exactly as before, until I reached the bedroom. Every strip of tape behind me was gone. I turned around. The joists were bare. I knew I'd tied them securely. There wasn't enough airflow to remove them. My breathing became noticeably faster. I checked the flashlight. Full battery. Radio. Working. Phone. No signal. Not surprising beneath the house. Then I heard it. 3 slow knocks. Directly beneath me. From the dirt. Knock. 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 The sound wasn't inside the walls. It wasn't beneath the floor. It came from the ground itself. I knelt and pressed one gloved hand against the soil. Cold. Damp. Then, something pushed back. Just enough for me to feel pressure beneath my palm. I jerked my hand away. The dirt looked completely undisturbed. I started crawling toward the exit. Fast. The beam from my headlamp bounced wildly across the foundation walls. Halfway there, I realized something. The crawl space seemed longer. Much longer. I should have reached the entrance already. Instead, another support beam appeared. Then another. Then another. As though the house had somehow grown. My radio crackled. "Brandon. Dispatch. You still at the inspection?" Relief flooded through me. "Yeah." A long pause followed. Then the dispatcher quietly asked, "Why did Richard just call and say you never went inside?" I stopped moving. "What?" "He says you've been standing in the driveway talking to him this whole time." The radio went silent. At that exact moment, I saw daylight ahead. The crawlspace opening. I crawled out so quickly I scraped both elbows on the concrete. Richard stood exactly where I'd left him. "You all right? You've been under there almost 40 minutes. I stared at him. "Didn't we just talk?" He frowned. "You haven't said a word since you went inside." Back at the office, I emptied my pockets. The flashlight battery was gone. Instead, I found one of my fluorescent survey ribbons. It had been tied into a tight knot. Across it, someone had written 3 words with black marker. "Not your house." I never carried a marker. Neither did Richard. A week later, another technician accepted the follow-up inspection. He quit before lunchtime. No explanation. I just tell them another crew knows the area better. The truth is, every time I hear a dispatcher calmly say, "Finish the repair," I remember the words carved 30 feet above the ground. "Don't reconnect this." And I wonder, who is still trying to keep that line disconnected? If you ever smell natural gas, don't try to find the leak yourself. Leave immediately. Call the utility company. Wait outside. That's the rule every technician repeats to customers. Natural gas has no smell on its own. The odor is added so people know something's wrong. After almost a decade working emergency gas service, I thought I understood every kind of leak. Then I responded to a neighborhood where every family smelled gas. But none of my instruments detected anything. Something else was waiting underground. My name is Travis. I worked emergency response for a natural gas utility covering several counties in the Midwest. We were on call 24 hours a day. Most overnight calls turned out to be harmless. Someone smelled sewer gas. A furnace pilot went out. A contractor hit an old service line. We checked the area, made repairs, went home. Real emergencies were rare. The call that changed everything came in just before midnight. Dispatch reported multiple gas odor complaints from the same neighborhood. 7 different houses, all within 2 blocks. No alarms, no pressure loss, no damaged mains. That was unusual. If 7 customers smelled gas at once, something serious was probably happening. My partner, Owen, and I loaded our leak detectors and headed out. The subdivision sat on the edge of town. Every porch light was on. Families stood outside in their driveways. Some held blankets around their shoulders. Others carried pets. Everyone described the same thing. A strong smell of gas. It had started almost simultaneously. Then, without warning, the smell disappeared. We began checking every house. Basements, meters, appliances, water heaters. Nothing. Every detector read 0. Not even the slightest trace of methane. Owen frowned. 7 false calls? At the same time? I shook my head. Doesn't happen. We expanded the search. Storm drains, valve boxes, pressure regulators. Everything tested perfectly. Even the underground main showed stable pressure. It was almost as if the gas had never been there. While inspecting a curb valve near the end of the street, I heard metal scraping. Not from the road, from below my feet. Slow, steady, like someone dragging a shovel through dirt. I looked at Owen. "You hear that?" He nodded. The sound stopped. We opened the valve box. Nothing. Only the shut-off valve and dry soil. No water. No damaged pipe. No animals. The scraping started again. This time, farther down the block. We followed it. Every time we reached the sound, it moved farther away. Always underground. Never above us. Residents watched us from their porches. Several asked if we'd found the leak. I told them not yet. I wasn't about to tell them we were following footsteps beneath the street. About 1 a.m, dispatch radioed another complaint. Same neighborhood. Different block. A woman reported smelling gas inside her kitchen. We arrived within minutes. The odor was overwhelming. Strong enough to make my eyes water. I switched on my detector. 0. No methane. No carbon monoxide. Nothing. The homeowner looked terrified. "You don't smell that?" "I do." My instrument remained silent. Gas odor without gas. That should have been impossible. We shut off service to the house anyway, just to be safe. The moment the valve closed, the smell vanished. Instantly. As we walked back toward the truck, I noticed every gas meter on the street had condensation covering the glass. The temperature wasn't cold enough for that. Even stranger, every meter needle had stopped moving. Not because gas wasn't flowing, because they were all frozen in exactly the same position. Owen tapped one of them. Nothing moved. He checked another. Same reading. Another. Exactly identical. Dozens of houses. Every meter displayed the same number. Neither of us had ever seen anything like it. Our supervisor arrived shortly afterward. He inspected several meters himself, then quietly asked, "Did anyone dig around here recently?" One homeowner raised his hand. The city replaced storm drains last month. That explained why we requested utility maps. Old records showed an abandoned gas main running beneath the neighborhood. It had supposedly been disconnected decades earlier. Supposedly. The city approved an emergency excavation. By sunrise, construction crews uncovered the abandoned pipeline. It wasn't connected to the active system. It had been sealed at both ends. There shouldn't have been any pressure inside. Yet, when workers removed the first section, everyone nearby smelled natural gas. Strong enough to force another evacuation. My detector still read 0. Inside the old pipe, there wasn't gas, only empty darkness. The flashlight beam disappeared much farther than the pipe should have extended, almost as though it continued beyond the excavation. One laborer leaned closer. "What is that?" Something echoed back. 3 metallic taps. From deep inside. Tap, tap, tap. Nobody answered. The tapping came again. Closer. This time, every utility worker stepped away from the trench. The foreman ordered the excavation filled immediately. No one argued. The old pipeline was capped again and buried beneath fresh soil. Officially, the odor was blamed on residual mercaptan trapped inside the abandoned line. Maybe that's true. Maybe it isn't. Several weeks later, I received another overnight call. Different neighborhood, different town. One customer reported smelling gas near their mailbox. I checked the area. No leaks. As I packed my equipment, I noticed the gas meter. The needle wasn't moving. It had stopped at exactly the same position as every meter from that first neighborhood. I called Owen. Before I could say anything, he interrupted. "Don't tell me. Same reading?" I slowly looked at the frozen meter. "Yeah," he sighed. "I found 3 today. Neither of us reported it. There wasn't anything to report. Pressure remained normal. No leaks. No alarms. No explanation. I still respond to emergency gas calls. Most are exactly what you'd expect. Broken fittings. Damaged service lines. Faulty appliances. Real leaks. Those don't bother me. What still keeps me awake are the calls where everyone smells gas, but the instruments insist the air is perfectly clean. Because sometimes, the most dangerous thing underground isn't what your equipment can detect. Every utility worker has a list of service calls they hate. Meter disconnects. Those are always near the top. Nobody is happy to see you. Some people argue. Some beg for more time. Others never answer the door. My job wasn't to ask questions. I showed up, disconnected the service, documented the meter reading, then drove to the next address. One afternoon, I received a disconnect order for a house that every map insisted had already been demolished. My name is Logan. I worked for an electric utility company that served several rural counties across the Midwest. Most mornings began the same way. A printed route, a truck full of replacement meters, a handheld scanner, dozens of addresses, reconnects, meter exchanges, occasional disconnects. Nothing exciting. The system told us exactly where to go. We followed the list. Simple. Until one address refused to disappear. Near the bottom of my route was a handwritten note. Final disconnect. Customer unavailable. That wasn't unusual. What caught my attention was the location. County Road 48. I had driven that road dozens of times. There weren't any houses left there. Only an abandoned grain elevator and open fields. I assumed the paperwork hadn't been updated. Still, company policy required every order to be completed. The GPS stopped working about 5 miles before the address. The screen froze, then restarted. I switched to the paper route book we carried as backup. It showed a narrow dirt lane branching away from the highway. I had never noticed it before. Tall grass nearly covered the entrance. There wasn't even a mailbox. The farther I drove, the older everything looked. Telephone poles leaned at strange angles. Power lines sagged through dead trees. Most of them weren't connected to anything. After almost a mile, I saw the house. Small, white, weathered. It stood alone beside an overgrown field. One electric meter hung beside the front door. Its glass was spotless, almost new. I parked beneath the service drop and grabbed my meter tools. The first thing I always checked was the meter number. Every meter had a serial number matching the work order. This one did. Exactly. I knocked on the front door. No answer. I waited. Knocked again. Nothing. Routine procedure allowed me to continue. I broke the meter seal and carefully pulled the meter from its socket. The moment it came free, every light inside the house turned on. That shouldn't have happened. Removing a meter cuts power. Instead, the house became brighter. Warm yellow light filled every window. A television began playing somewhere inside. Then I heard footsteps, walking slowly toward the front door. I stepped back. The knob turned. The door opened halfway. An elderly man smiled politely. "You finally made it." I stared at the empty meter socket beside him. The house had no electrical connection. It should have been completely dark. "I'm here about your electric service." "I know." He looked past me toward the truck. "You're later than usual." "I'm sorry." He chuckled softly. "You always are." Before I could respond, the lights inside flickered. Every lamp went dark, then came back on. The old man sighed. "They're calling you." My radio crackled. "Dispatch. Logan, status check." I answered immediately. "I'm at the disconnect." Long silence. Then, "What disconnect?" "County Road 48. Another pause. "There aren't any active customers on County Road 48. I slowly looked back at the house. The old man had disappeared. The front door stood open. Inside, the lights were off. Completely dark. I should have left. Instead, I stepped inside. The house was empty. Dust covered the furniture. Spiderwebs stretched across the windows. The television I'd heard was missing. The air smelled stale, like no one had lived there for years. Yet, a kitchen clock quietly ticked on the wall. I followed the sound. The clock hands weren't moving. Only the ticking continued. Steady. Loud. Too loud. Then, my handheld meter scanner beeped. I looked down. It had automatically recorded a final meter reading. No meter was installed. Nothing was connected. Yet the screen displayed electrical usage climbing steadily. Higher. 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 The reading increased every second, far beyond what a normal house could consume. I tried clearing the display. It wouldn't reset. A voice echoed softly behind me. "Did you write it down?" I spun around. Nobody. The hallway remained empty. The front door slammed shut. Not violently. Slowly. Deliberately. The latch clicked. Then the deadbolt turned by itself. I grabbed the handle. Locked. I unlocked it. The handle wouldn't move, as though someone held it shut from outside. Every light in the house suddenly came on again. Except there wasn't any electricity. The empty meter socket outside remained disconnected. I knew because I was still holding the meter in my left hand. Then I noticed something strange. The disconnected meter. Its glass had fogged from the inside. Words slowly appeared across the condensation. One more reading. The scanner beeped again. The usage number stopped climbing. It settled on a final value. Then the screen shut off completely. Battery dead. Even though I'd installed a fresh one that morning. At that exact moment, the front door opened. By itself. Sunlight poured into the hallway. The lights inside the house disappeared. Everything looked abandoned again. Silent. Still. Empty. I walked straight back to the truck. I didn't look behind me. Not once. Back at the service center, I uploaded the day's meter data. Every account transferred normally. Except one. County Road 48. The system rejected it. Reason. Account closed. I asked an older supervisor about the address. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened an old filing cabinet and pulled out a faded property folder. This place? I nodded. He quietly closed the folder again. That house burned down a long time ago. What about the customer? There wasn't one left. I never told him about the old man, or the lights, or the meter reading. I knew how impossible it sounded. Several weeks later, I received another route sheet. At the very bottom, written in the same handwriting, was another service order. Final meter reading. Same address. County Road 48. I walked straight into dispatch and handed the paperwork back. I can't take this one. They looked confused. It isn't on your route. I pointed to the paper. The line was gone. Completely blank. No address. No note. Nothing. I still work around electric meters every day. Thousands of them. Most record exactly what they're supposed to. But every once in a while, I'll find one with the glass fogging from the inside. Just for a second. Long enough to remind me that somewhere, there's still one customer waiting for a final reading that should have been completed long ago.